Sonic had just finished enjoying a delicious chili dog for lunch, and now he was on a run through the forest. That being said, it didn't feel like even 5 minutes had gone by before he started to feel a tickle in his nose. He tried to ignore it, but it kept getting stronger as the seconds rolled by, and soon he had to skid to a stop. By that point, his nose was twitching and trembling around, a sign that he was going to sneeze. Ah! Sonic inhaled, tilting his neck back as his eyelids lowered. Then his eyes squeezed shut as he broke into a sneezing fit, shooting his upper body forwards with each release. Achoo! Achoo! Luckily, none of these sneezes were too loud or powerful, but they were a bit forceful. They didn't provide much relief to his itchy nose either. Sonic sniffled as he rubbed his hand underneath his nose, his eyes a bit watery. What the... Sonic said to himself. What was making his nose feel so ticklish? He could have sworn he'd taken his allergy medicine this morning. Sonic turned around and ran out of the forest, heading for Tails' house. If there was anyone who could help him with a problem like this one, it had to have been Tails. Along the way, Sonic had to slow down a couple of times to sneeze again, but he kept rubbing his nose after each sneeze until he'd arrived at his destination. Hey, Sonic, Tails greeted him, opening the door. How are you doing? I'm alright, but... Achoo! Sonic let out another sneeze, instinctively putting both of his hands over his mouth and nose. It may have looked cute to see him do that, but Tails couldn't help but wish he'd sneezed into his arm instead. He knew he couldn't help himself there, however, so he decided not to bring that up. Bless you, Tails said as Sonic rubbed his nose with his forefinger. Thanks, Sonic replied with a light sniffle. I was just out for a run when I started sneezing for some reason. Tails thought for a moment, then stepped out of the way so that Sonic could come inside. Why don't you tell me what happened first, Sonic? Shh! Sonic stifled another sneeze, again putting his hand over his mouth. He then spoke, rubbing his nose again as he did. So I'd taken some allergy medicine this morning so I wouldn't start sneezing. And then I spent a few hours running around the fields and through the forest. He sniffled. By the time I thought I'd gone far enough, I was pretty hungry, so I stopped by a fast food place and bought a chili dog for lunch. It was really good, but now I feel this weird tickle in my... Hapchoo! Another sneeze, and then his forefinger went back underneath his nose, almost automatically. Excuse me. I think something on your chili dog might be what's making you sneeze, Tails theorized as Sonic resumed rubbing his nose. Did you check if it had anything suspicious on it before you ate it? Sonic gave another sniffle. Yeah, it didn't have anything different, just chili and cheese. But I might have seen some black specks in the chili and on the cheese, too. One more sniffle. Not to mention, it was a little spicier than usual. That was when Tails realized. Wait a minute. Whoever prepared your chili dog must have added some black pepper to it by mistake. What? Sonic's eyes widened in slight disbelief, but then his nose began to tremble again. Sometimes even the mention of pepper was enough to make him need to sneeze, so he quickly turned away and fired down another sneeze, without covering his mouth. It was much louder and more forceful than most of his other sneezes, and Tails winced as he gasped in surprise. Achoo! Gesundheit, Tails said, looking a bit concerned as Sonic rubbed his nose again with his forefinger. Sorry. Sonic sniffled again as he continued to rub his nose. At least that explains why my nose is so sensitive. Speaking of which, I was wondering if you could try and help me stop sneezing. Of course, Sonic, said Tails. He'd seen Sonic sneeze from pepper before, so he could understand what he was going through at the moment. I'm not sure it might be the best idea, but I'll see what I can do. Even as Sonic finished rubbing his nose, Tails could tell that his nose was beginning to twitch again. The moment the hedgehog's breath began to hitch again. That was when Tails reached up and placed the side of his forefinger underneath Sonic's nose. Sonic stood where he was with a bit of a ridiculous expression on his face, but he could feel his breath steadily return to normal. Thanks, said Sonic, and Tails cautiously removed his forefinger. A pause followed, but the sneeze didn't come. Sonic just sniffled a couple of times. Tails smiled in relief. He had tried using the forefinger under the nose trick on Sonic multiple times before, but most of his past attempts had been unsuccessful, so it was nice to have it work this time around. That being said, the attempt gave him an idea, and he decided he wanted to try it out. Hey Sonic, have you ever had someone rub your nose for you when you were about to sneeze? No, not really, Sonic replied. Why? I was thinking, maybe if I try rubbing your nose the next time I feel a sneeze coming on, it'll help you keep you from releasing the sneeze. Well, I suppose we could give it a... Sonic started, but before he could finish his sentence, his breath began to hitch again. His eyelids lowered, then fell shut. The sneeze was coming on again, along with the tickle that had faded away from his nose less than a few minutes ago. Ah! 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 Before he could sneeze, however, Tails placed his forefinger back underneath Sonic's nose. This time, however, he began moving his hand back and forth, rubbing his nose as he tried to relieve his urge to sneeze. Sonic could still feel a few tickles in his nose, but they were getting weaker as Tails continued. The feeling of his finger rubbing his nose was rather satisfying, almost as much as how it felt when he rubbed his own nose. Any better? Tails asked. A little, Sonic claimed. Just as he thought he wasn't going to sneeze, however, he shot his neck forward as he exploded again, which startled Tails into pulling his hand away. Achoo! Ugh! Sonic sulked as he rubbed his nose again with his forefinger. Well, it was worth a shot, Tails said to himself before saying, Bless you, Sonic. Sonic didn't thank him, however. He just sighed in defeat as he continued to rub his nose. If that didn't work, I'm afraid the only way to stop your sneezing is to wait until it goes away on its own, Tails stated. I was afraid you'd say that. Sonic sniffled a couple times, rather audibly. He wasn't looking forward to having to wait for his problem to fix itself, but he knew he didn't have much of a choice. Besides, his nose had become rather congested after Tails' attempts to stop his sneezes. If only he had something to blow or wipe his nose with. But in the meantime, I have something that might come in handy. Tails reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, one that was white in color and made with soft cotton. He offered it to Sonic. Here. Want my handkerchief? Sonic brought his hand up to accept the handkerchief, but almost no sooner than he'd taken it did another sneeze come forth. He only had enough time to put the cloth over his nose right before he tried to stifle. It almost looked like he was blowing his nose at the same time. Thanks, Tails. Sonic wiped his nose with the handkerchief, a couple more snuffles filling the air. The little smile that appeared on his face, however, indicated that his nose was finally getting a bit of the relief he needed. He could see Tails smiling as well, happy to help his friend. No problem, Sonic, and bless you, replied Tails. You can have that if you'd like. Just make sure to wash it before you give it back, okay? Sonic lowered the handkerchief from his face, then placed it in his pocket for later. I will. I was going to ask for one of these anyway. He gave another sniffle, this one less loud, as he rubbed his nose lightly with his forefinger. I think I'm going to go now. Thanks for helping me out, Tails. Let me know if you need anything else. With that, Sonic headed out of Tails' house, though the fox had to open the door for him since he'd seen him sneezing into his hands earlier. Once he'd gotten home, the hedgehog washed his hands to clean them off, and then he took it easy for the rest of the day, relaxing and biding his time. When he least expected it, he sneezed again, sometimes once and sometimes multiple times. But each time he finished sneezing, Sonic made sure to wipe his nose with the handkerchief Tails had lent him. Sometimes he blew his nose gently before wiping it, too. It helped provide some extra relief to his nasal passages. Even as the effects of the pepper slowly wore off, however, Sonic had a feeling he was going to need this handkerchief for a while. The end.